Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakuya. The title of today's talk is Only Two Things Matter in Life. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. As Buddhists, frankly, as human beings, it can be tough to determine the best way to spend our time on this planet. On average, Americans live 70 to 80 years, and that seems like a long time, but as we get older, we realize it's really not. We realize the importance of our time and our attention, and we want to strive to use that attention carefully. So what should we do with it? Well, it's my position that there are only two things that matter in life. Only two things truly worthy of our time and our attention. Those things are enlightenment and the end of suffering for ourselves and other people. I'm pausing here, so you know I'm serious. There's no but, no and also, no equivocation in this Dharma talk. The only things that matter in life, the two things that we should focus on are enlightenment and the end of suffering for ourselves and others. Now, admittedly, that's a very provocative statement. I'm sure it conjures up lots of feelings, thoughts, and emotions in your mind, but if you're willing to go on this journey with me, I promise that you'll find that everything that's important in life falls under the umbrella of those two items, and everything that is unimportant, that's superfluous, that frankly we should probably get rid of, falls outside of the umbrella of those two things. So let's start with the first, enlightenment. What is it? Well, the Nirvana Sutra tells us that all living beings possess Buddha nature. That is, we have the pure, luminous mind of Buddha within us. This mind is uncreated, thus it is undefiled. However, it is covered over by the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance, in the same way that a buried treasure of gold and silver might be covered over by several layers of soil if it's buried in your backyard. The treasure is there, but we can't see it because of the soil. In the same way, our pure, luminous mind is always there, but we can't see it because of the defilements. Thus, enlightenment is the removal of the poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance from our minds so that our Buddha nature, our enlightened nature, can come forth in daily life. And what does that mean, our Buddha nature comes forth? It means that we enter into non-dual awareness with the world around us. The illusion of a separate self disappears, and we see all living beings as an extension of ourselves. This is why some Buddhists describe enlightenment by saying we look at other people and we see our own face. Or I sometimes describe it by saying that we care for others in the same way we care for our own hands. If my hands are cold, I put them in my pocket without thinking because I understand intuitively, instinctively, that my hands are part of my physical body. Once we realize enlightenment and realize other people are part of our Buddha body, we care for them in the same way. If someone is hungry, we feed them in the same way we would feed ourselves. If someone is cold, we give them a jacket in the same way we would give ourselves a jacket. Because we understand there really is no self and other, there is only Buddha. This is the mind of enlightenment. Now, what does this have to do with the second item, which is the end of suffering for ourselves and others? And I alluded to this a little bit So you may see where I'm going. However, when we talk about the end of suffering for ourselves and others, we first need to ask, well, what is the root cause of suffering? Why is there so much anguish and gnashing of teeth in the human experience? And the reason for this is the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance, which I alluded to earlier. All of the suffering in human history can be traced back to those three poisons or a combination of the three. I'll give you a few examples. We have a hunger problem here in the United States. Many people go to bed either hungry or food insecure, unsure where they'll get their next meal. Now, you might think the problem is we just don't have enough food, but that's not true. The fact is, 40% of the food grown in the United States ends up in a landfill. It either never makes it off of the farm, or it's damaged in transit, or it's purchased by consumers and we just throw it away. Thus, lack of food is not the reason there is hunger and starvation in the United States. It's greed. We would rather throw food away than give it to hungry people. The United States spent trillions of dollars on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Lives were lost, lives were destroyed, buildings were damaged, families were torn apart. Why? Because of anger. And we as human beings continue in these processes of greed and anger, of capitalism and war, because we foolishly believe that this will lead to happiness for ourselves and others. This is ignorance. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. Greed, anger, and ignorance are the source of all human suffering. Thus, the removal of these three poisons is how we end suffering for all human beings. And what happens when we remove greed, anger, and ignorance from our minds? We realize enlightenment. Thus, enlightenment and the end of suffering feed each other like a healthy, life-affirming circle. Every time we work to end the suffering of others, we move ourselves closer to enlightenment. The closer we get to enlightenment, the more we want to end suffering for ourselves and others. This is why I said everything that's truly important falls under this umbrella. You want to take care of your family and your friends? Remove greed from your mind so that you can be more giving towards them of your time and your attention. You want to care for your community? Remove the anger from your mind so that you can be nice to your neighbors. You want to be good at your vocation? Remove ignorance from your mind. Educate yourself so that you're better able to find solutions to problems when they arise. And as we do this, as we focus on enlightenment and the end of suffering for ourselves and others, everyone's existence on this earth improves. And if we're unsure what to do with our time on this planet, we can measure our decisions against those two items. Will this thing help me realize enlightenment? Will this thing help me end suffering for myself and others? If the answer is no, maybe we should find something else to do with our time. But if the answer is yes, then we can give ourselves to that thing wholeheartedly, knowing we're not just doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for the good of all sentient beings. Amitabha.